What's Miami's status in the upcoming draft, and how is it affected by the play-in tournament? We'll explain that plus the worst-case scenario for the Heat on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Join more than 16,000 subscribers here and make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast app. Your favorite podcast has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter. One stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Stay tuned for a chance to win some big prizes by signing up to that newsletter. Also, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Have a great show for you today. We're going to cover everything you need to know about the Heat's draft picks and what's at stake in these final two games. But before we get into all of that, David, I want to get to this quote from Austin Reaves, who told ESPN in a story when asked about the challenges of being a white player in a predominantly black league, quote, "You know, as a white guy in the NBA, I sometimes look at white players and I'm like, they're not very good. So it's a stigma that I think is real." End quote. What did you make of that? First of all, the stigma of white players in the league, that they're just not good. I don't know that the stigma is that they're not good. I think the stigma is that maybe they're bad defensively. But what did you think Reaves meant by all that?
I don't know. I haven't read the article, so
Okay.
super caveat there. I've not read it, so I don't know what the context or nuance was, and there's always going to be. And this is really dicey conversation here because I don't think there's any one size fits all in any kind of player like that. Like, I think we're seeing that differently now in terms of like what Cooper Flagg, like he's the projected number one pick over several black collegiate players. And from what everybody says, he's got that dog in him. And that's where it gets kind of tricky, is that there's this kind of unquantifiable quality that makes you that the perception is that you're good enough to hang with other players, specifically other black players. And some players have it. Cooper Flagg, I think Tyler has it. Does Duncan have it? I would say probably not. He's probably not viewed that way, which doesn't make them any worse as NBA players. Like, I mean, I'm surprised by Austin's comments because it's not like, for him to say they're not very good, like, what are we talking about? What's the scale here? Like, Duncan's a hell of an NBA player. He's just not the best NBA player. He's also not the worst NBA player. And I don't think any of that has to do with him being white. Like, there are far worse players than he is who happen to be black. And I don't think that makes much of a difference. So it's very, very strange to kind of break it down this way. But I think there is a stigma. Again, it is a predominantly black league, has been for a while. You hear stories about Larry Bird, like as a white player from, Indiana, French Lick, Indiana. You can't get whiter than that, right? And yeah, it was a rural area and everything else. But then he goes into the league, and as a guy who kind of had a little bit extra spice to him, or maybe wasn't typical of white players in the 70s and 80s, he says himself that when he was guarded by a white player from the opposing team, he would take that as an insult, knowing that maybe these white players weren't athletic enough to really challenge him or to try and stop him in any way. And as a result, he would try to have a little bit extra to try and show him up when he was being guarded by those players. And so that stigma has been around for 40 plus years. And I think it's just going to continue to be that way until at some point, I guess players will just kind of look at it and say, you know what, it doesn't ultimately matter. White, black, you can defend at a high level, you can score at a high level, you can play at a high level, and it really ultimately doesn't matter. And I think we're closer to that point now than we were, say, during Bird's time. Although, I guess, according to Reaves, he still believes that stigma is pretty prevalent in today's NBA.
So here's the full little excerpt here. So bear with me. But This is straight from the ESPN story. Reaves is used to proving himself and breaking down stereotypes. You know, as a white guy in the NBA, I sometimes look at white players and I'm like, they're not very good. So it's a stigma that I think is real. JJ Redick, who played 15 years in the league, understands, quote, I think every guy in our shoes has experienced some level of this where you're going to be tested. And truthfully, no matter how many times you pass that test, you're going to be tested again. Reaves passed that test with LeBron James during training camp of his rookie season when he was originally signed to a two-way contract. I saw that early, man. LeBron told ESPN, when we picked him up, I went back and started watching his Oklahoma highlights and stuff and seeing the way that he handled the ball and his creative side to be able to create shots off the bounce, his competitive fire, his drive. I could see it. I could see he had a spirit about him. He had an energy about him, end quote. So a lot of kind of what you were touching on there, it's the competitive fire. It's the thing. I'm just telling you what I know from covering the league, and you talk to players all the time.
Yeah.
It's on the defensive end.
Yeah.
It's white guys can't play defense.
Right.
And I think some of it is also the ball handling and stuff like that. It's every white guy who's in the NBA is Kyle Korver, basically. And they can't play defense at a high level. They can't handle the ball. They're not creative with the ball. There's none of that sizzle, right? There's none of that stuff. And I think Austin Reaves has a lot of that. I think he's extremely creative with the basketball, like LeBron James is saying. But I want to bring this back to the Miami Heat part of this because, you know, you talk to somebody like Tyler Hero, and he's been very open about I don't want to misquote him, but he has been open about the fact that defensively he's a target. Sure. And I think Duncan Robinson has also been open about, and by the way, going back to Duncan Robinson here, just catching needless strays of one of these aggregation sites, putting Duncan Robinson in their like clutch points graphic or clutch point style graphic of sometimes I look at white players and I'm like, they're not very good. And it's just like people not watching on YouTube. Austin Reaves staring at Duncan Robinson, which is just
as if like, Duncan was the worst player in the league and specifically the worst white player in the league.
Name several worst white players. Why is Duncan Robinson catching
he's put up historic numbers as a scorer and shooter, and it's like, no, sorry, you're just not good enough because you happen to be white. I mean, it's like
one of the most prolific 3-point shooters in NBA history.
Yeah, and his is like the whitest of white stories in terms of like he grew up in the smallish part of New England and like what was it, Connecticut, and like and you know you can't get more.
Yeah, he was born in the Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, yeah, the powdered section. I mean, he was just
that's why his name is Duncan.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it was just unbelievable that you put him in the graphic. Like, you know. Like I would say in terms of like white players, like Duncan is pretty, I think above average.
White players, Robinson.
Yeah. What was that?
It said quick, name 3 worst white players than Duncan Robinson.
Garrison, what was his name?
That's a good one.
Garrison Matthews. Yeah. I think Jaime Jaquez, does he qualify as a Latino? Like, I mean.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too, is now we have European white, right? Like you could argue
don't qualify.
They don't qualify, but you look at Nikola Jokic's skin,
right?
But they don't qualify. And Luka Doncic doesn't qualify. Yeah, Luka doesn't qualify. Yeah. So it's an American white player, I think, is what the stigma is. You know, it's out there. It is what it is. But I think there's several good white players in the league. Austin Reaves and Tyler Hero, Chet Holmgren. I mean, these guys are all. Reaves isn't an all-star. He could be. Chet Holmgren will be. Hero is, and just was. Cooper Flagg is coming back and is coming into the NBA, and everybody's talking about him as a generational prospect. And you watch these Duke games, and you're like, yeah, what's wrong? I can't find a flaw with this guy. Even the shooting is better than I think a lot of people expected out of Cooper Flagg going into his freshman year at Duke. So, I don't know. It's a strange stigma, but I get it, and it's there. And you know what? It happens. Like,
where does Kevin Love fall in that? Like young Kevin Love was different.
Yeah, I mean, he was the top 5 player in the league for 2 or 3 years there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think he's quite a Hall of Fame level player, but certainly a multi-time All-Star.
Mickey Harrison can get into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Kevin Love can get into the Basketball.
Maybe. I mean, it all depends on his. He didn't have much of a collegiate career, and he does have the one Olympic experience. So maybe that's enough, but I don't know. But either way, like in terms of like, was he viewed as that's a white guy I'm going to target? I don't think so. I don't remember that ever being.
I think it's different for bigs just because they're 7 feet tall. right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But he was always targeted on switches,
Yes.
right? Like very famously. And by the way, he like the stigma was real. Like he was not good. He had that great moment in the finals against Steph where he locked him up. But generally
Yeah.
speaking, he was not good when you drew him out on switches. But at the same time, I don't think he was as bad as maybe his reputation was, but he still wasn't very good.
I will say, and this is purely anecdotal in my own perspective here. I have seen over the course of covering this team that there are certain players that when they get hero on them, they take it much more as like that Larry Bird type personal challenge. Like, oh, you're going to stick that guy on me? And I don't think it has anything to do with his defense or his ability, but just so much as what I might perceive as, oh, okay, you're gonna stick the inferior white boy on me. That ain't gonna happen. I'm gonna like even not even a good player. Like I'm talking Marcus Smart used to
Right.
take the challenge of being guarded by Tyler Hero personally. Like, hey, Marcus, you can't do anything offensively. Like, there's a reason why he's guarding you. It's because he's kind of stuck on you because you don't really need to be
We're not worried
defended all
about you.
that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So for him to take it personally, or at least again in my perception, was more a result of him being a poor scorer than anything else. But yeah, you see a lot of these former players now. I think Patrick Beverly has done a podcast about it, like the white players that are black enough, quote unquote, black enough. And Tyler's made the team, and Chet is like number one, like
Right.
Chet, according to Pat Beverly, passes the test. He goes to the cookout. He's like whatever that qualifies as. I don't know if it's just in the way they talk or the way they carry themselves or anything else like that. But apparently they've got enough sizzle and back up their game just well enough so that they qualify as okay. I don't see you as just a white player anymore.
So here's Beverly's team. Are you ready?
Yeah.
He said it's the I guess it's the least white all white starting five. That's what he calls it. Tyler Hero, Dante DiVincenzo. That's a good one.
Okay. And
Yeah.
whose nickname is White Dante? Because I guess Dante being kind of a typical black name, but I mean, he's White Dante. Like, I guess, I don't know.
Tyler Hero, Dante DiVincenzo, Alex Caruso, Garrison Matthews,
Caruso,
and Chet Holmgren. I think Caruso and Matthews might have been just the last two white players he could think of. But I think we have a clear.
Himself, he couldn't
I
think
think
of
we have three.
else.
I think we have three captains on that team and then two role players. I think that's what it is.
Caruso and Matthews. I don't know Matthews personally. Caruso, I've talked to. Like, I'm sorry, he's not. That's not
accurate.
It's not a. Yeah, okay. I don't think so.
The Heat have 2 games left this season, and the tanking conversation is picking up steam. We're going to tell you what the Heat could gain from losing these 2 games, what they could lose by winning these final 2 games after this here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 25 regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. You've got just a couple days left of the regular season. Now's your time to cash in and take advantage of this incredible opportunity. After an epic 50-point performance, you can celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot, and they get delivered straight to your door. So many great options, and DoorDash has you covered. So sign up for DoorDash and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Who wants to start off their week with a nice discounted order from DoorDash? You do. So just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms to apply, but visit DoorDash to learn more. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. We're going to get into the standings, the draft pick scenarios, everything you need to know over these next 2 games. So quick standings update. The Hawks beat the Nets last night, so we're going to take a quick look at where things are in regards to the play-in tournament. The Hawks, 38-42. The Bulls, 37-43. The Heat, 36-44. So Miami, 2 games back of Atlanta in that 8th spot, a game back of Chicago, and really 2 games back of Chicago because they don't have the tiebreaker against the Bulls because the Bulls Just keep eating Miami's lunch. But so essentially, the Heat are locked in. There's no way. Playoff status gives Miami a 93% chance of getting that 10 seed. They're going to be the 10 seed. Like, we're done here. So that's the standings update part of this. The Heat do face the 21-59 Pelicans tonight in New Orleans. And here's the injury report. Tyler Hero is probable. Alec Burks is probable. Haywood Highsmith is probable. Duncan Robinson with the lower back injury is available. Andrew Wiggins with the right hamstring that's been bothering him, available. Bam Adebayo, who was on the injury report but played, not even on the injury report anymore as he's dealing with these lower back spasms. I lobbied on the last episode. The Heat should tank these last two games for several reasons, but just to tank, to maybe improve your draft lottery status, but then also just make sure that you're healthy for the play-in tournament. You have nothing to play for in these games. This is just the hubris of Heat culture. I don't understand why you would be sending your players. Everybody's traveling. Nikola Jovic is with the team right now.
Yeah.
I am not a tanking guy. That's not anything to do with this, but you literally have nothing to gain with these games. I can't imagine that this team is looking at that 7% chance of escaping the number 10 seed and being like, that's worth playing for. It's not.
No, I can't. It can't be. It's so unrealistic. And this is not a couple seasons ago where you could say everybody's available and you don't have to stash them on the injury report. Now, obviously, you face some scrutiny and some violations if you don't include them, if you're not full disclosure about which players are out, because they're trying to make sure that their team stars are available
on these games.
Yeah.
There's sort of an unwritten rule here. Yeah.
It does not make any sense. Like, it's a good way of putting it, the hubris of Heat culture, but I can't imagine why it's so important for Eric Spoelstra to play these guys that have played so many games, and you're not going to get anything out of it. You're not collecting a bonus as a result of games played. You're not locking in your status for a postseason award or anything like that. None of it seems to make any sense. It's so much better to rest all your players and keep them healthy for the play-in tournament, because that's ultimately a goal. Like, what are you going to accomplish if you wind up beating down the New Orleans Pelicans? Worst case, even if you flip that around, what happens if you lose? Like, is that the kind of psychological blow that you want to have before you go into the play-in tournament?
I guess if I were going to try to see Miami's reasoning here, is we've seen what this team can do with just a little bit of pep in their step. You know, they beat Charlotte, who I think they should have beaten Charlotte, and then they go on and beat the Warriors in that big Jimmy Butler return game. So maybe the idea is we actually need momentum more than we need health.
Yeah.
Where I guess I could see it, but also I still disagree with it. To your point, you still have to play this play-in tournament, right? Like, these two games don't matter. You're going to have to win back-to-back games anyway. So maybe the idea is, hey, let's just win 2 straight games, and we're feeling confident about ourselves going into the play-in tournament. That's the only reason, and I can even understand that reason. Like, I really can. But to me, I just think, while I can understand that reason, I understand more shutting it down, improving your draft lottery odds potentially, and being healthy for the play-in tournament, because I do think that that's probably more important than whatever confidence boost you get from beating a reeling Pelicans team and a Wizards team that is actively trying to lose games. But I don't know. I mean, who knows? Like, had they beaten Chicago, I don't know. It's very weird. It's very weird. So let's take a look here. So Miami, they play New Orleans on Friday night tonight. They play Washington at home on Sunday for the final game of the regular season. And when we talk about tanking, you have to obviously look at the teams around you in the lottery. So Miami, 36-44. They're 11th in the lottery odds right now. They'll have a hard time moving lower, I suppose, like to 12, 13, 14 in the lottery at this point. But there's still a potential for them to move higher. Like, they could get into the 9th best odds here, because they're basically a game back of Phoenix and of Portland, both of whom are 35 and 45. So just a game difference. You look at Miami's schedule, we already said it. Portland's schedule, they play the Warriors and the Lakers. They could lose both of those games. And if they lose both of those games, they'll probably end up with the 9th best odds. They're tied right now with Phoenix. Phoenix plays the Spurs tonight, and then Sacramento. They could split I mean, Phoenix is reeling, man. Like, they might actually shut it down at this point. I mean, they don't have any reason to, because they owe their pick to Houston. But Like they could
But
lose
they've just
easily
been
one of
through
those
so
games.
much. They're kind of similar through Miami in the sense that they've just gone through so much over the
Yeah.
course of the season, being constantly linked in trade talks and injuries and everything else, and falling well short of expectations that they're not playing for anything. It's those other teams, the Portlands, even tonight against the Pelicans. Those teams have something to kind of prove to themselves because you have guys on that roster who are trying to carve out a name for themselves or establish themselves as potential NBA players, maybe extend their careers to a certain extent, play spoiler. Those things matter. Miami is on the receiving end of that. They're not playing for anything. They have nothing to benefit from winning tonight. So it's up to the Pelicans to say, you know what, those guys at the end of the roster, guys like Yves Missi or other roster players that want to show out to prove that they can continue to play at a high level, etc. Whereas Miami, again, it's so ridiculous that they're playing with something like they have something to gain from this. Not only is their draft status impacted, but their health status impacted. What if it's a bad fall for Bam Adebayo in a meaningless game against the New Orleans Pelicans? Like, how do you justify that when
Right.
you're trying to win the play-in tournament? It's
It's a great point.
unfathomable to me.
Because you're risking injury now.
Yeah. Like,
It's insane.
give
I don't get
Keyshawn
it.
Johnson and Josh Christopher an opportunity. If Niko Jovic is available, let him
Yeah.
play just to warm up. I mean, you've got plenty of guys on the roster who can go out there who'd love to be on an NBA
You also have
floor
to
with
make a
something to prove.
decision on somebody like Josh Christopher and Keyshawn Johnson. Isaiah Stevens
Yeah.
is questionable with a foot injury, but Keyshawn Johnson is part of the roster right now. He's on a standard contract. That does not mean he's guaranteed a standard contract next year. And then with
Right.
Christopher, he's on that two-way. So I think they're, and I don't know how much you can actually glean from these two games, but you can glean more than if you
Sure.
didn't play him at all. So I don't know. Maybe maybe all these guys will be a scratch in the last minute. Maybe they all come out and play the first quarter, and then they all get benched. Like, all that stuff is still possible. I'm not going to rule it out, but it just seems to me that you would have so much more to gain by not playing these guys.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
with the Heat having the 11th best odds, what's at stake here is, look, if you go from, at best, you can maybe move into the 9th best odds. But what we're really talking about, not much of a difference between the chance of moving up from the number 9, 10, 11 to number 1, right? You go from basically a 2% chance with the 11th odds to a 3.8% chance with the 9th best odds. So not much of a difference there. We did see Atlanta move up from 10 to 1 last year, though. So it happens. But really, you go from, the odds are bigger when you talk about the odds of moving into a top 4 pick. Right now, the Heat have a 9.4% chance of landing a top 4 pick in a draft that has a pretty clear top 4, by the way. To, if you had the 9th best odds, that's a 17.3% chance. That's a twice as better chance almost of moving into the top 4. It's small. And maybe ultimately the Heat just did the math on it and said, look, we're talking about a 9% chance or a 17% chance. Who cares? Let's just let the basketball gods award us if they want to. But I don't know. It just, again, there's just so much at stake here that just doesn't seem reasonable to try to win these games. But you lose these 2 games and Portland wins and Portland loses, but Phoenix wins one of theirs. And Portland can lose Portland can win one of those games. They've been pretty feisty.
Sure.
Like, they could beat the Warriors tonight, no question.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's strange. Look, the Heat aren't just watching their own pick. They also have Golden State's coming over from the Jimmy Butler trade. We're going to take a look at where that could end up in the worst case scenario for the Heat in the draft after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, well, that used to be a challenge until you use Game Time. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you see the total cost up front. No surprises at checkout. Here's why you should be using Game Time. You got last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. You can grab great last minute seats for the Marlins or maybe for the Heat play-in tournament and then save big with their zone deals. And you get seat views before you buy. So you get peace of mind, no surprise fees, and a lower price guarantee. And you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The playoff race is heating up as the season winds down. Can the Heat secure a spot in the play-in tournament and make the playoffs? Stay in the know with Locked On Heat, the Locked On Heat podcast newsletter, and get a chance to win one of these amazing prizes by subscribing. You can win a $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your Sports Cave setup, a $300 Game Time gift card to get some tickets, and a $200 Fanatics gift card for some great merchandise. Sign up for the Locked On Heat newsletter between April 7th and April 30th this year. So do it right now to be entered into the contest. Our Heat newsletter delivers real-time updates, expert analysis, and playoff insights tailored for you. Subscribe now for free to the Locked On Heat podcast newsletter and stay ahead of the season as it unfolds. Subscribe today. Click the link in the description to enter lockedondaily.com. So, of course, the Heat don't just have their own pick that we're talking about. They also have that Warriors pick that's coming over from the Jimmy Butler trade. Right now, the Warriors are in a three-way tie for the 19th best odds in the lottery, but they're 1-2 games from maybe even that pick sliding to the middle of the 20s. So this is another pick worth monitoring here. So there's a best case scenario and there's a worst case scenario. I think the best case scenario in terms of keeping these picks would be that Miami ends up with two top 20 picks. That Golden State, they play in Portland Friday tonight, and then they play the Clippers on Sunday. The Clippers are playing really well lately. So they can probably split those and end up 19 and 20 potentially. And then, Miami, do they drop one of these? Do they drop both of these? Can they, like the absolute dream best case scenario would be Miami's pick just falls into the top 4 somehow. And you have a top 4 pick and then like the 19th or 20th pick in this draft. That would be the best case scenario for Miami. The worst case would be that the Heat win these 2 games for no reason. They're picking at the end of the lottery. And then the Warriors win a couple of these games, and that pick ends up in the mid-20s. So that would be the worst. Or in terms of just draft pick equity in general, the worst case scenario could be that the Heat make the playoffs. They actually make it through the play-in tournament, make the playoffs, lose their pick, and then just end up with like the 25th pick in this draft. So what looked like potentially at one point a chance to have a top 10 pick and a top 20 pick coming over for Golden State ends up being no pick in the lottery and then just picking basically where you picked Nikola Jovic a couple years ago.
Not great. I don't know what to make of the situation because it just, again, it's not even up to you can't control this as the team. Like they're kind of relying on Golden State and whoever Golden State faces, and that makes it a lot more dicey. So you're kind of hoping for a lot of things to play out, and you have no control of those things. Plus, I mean, again, as we talked about, you're kind of facing these upcoming games, and the players on the roster, to our point, they're not concerned about the draft. They're not thinking about trying to get improved draft status or anything like that. To them, it doesn't really matter because whoever gets drafted means one less job on the roster for somebody who's currently on the roster. And so,
well, can I ask you something then?
Sure.
How bad do you think the Heat need these picks? Like, what would hypothetically 2 top 20 picks mean to this roster?
I think it's just trade collateral.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing now with Niko Jovic and Jaime Jaquez and some of the other players on the roster, those mid picks, they're generally mid picks for a reason. And that's not to say that Jovic and Jaquez don't have potential. I think we're both fans of what they can bring to the table, although recently we talked about whether or not the season was a failure for them both. And
Right.
We agreed that it was. But, you're not going to, you can't really, this team doesn't need more mid players. They need a star.
Right.
And so whatever that path to acquiring a star is, whether you have to trade those picks or whether somehow you get really lucky and you wind up drafting a player who emerges as a star, which doesn't seem likely at those numbers that we're talking about in terms of where they would wind up in the NBA draft. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's an advantage for them one way or the other. Like, I know every fan is kind of conditioned to say more picks. But what are you going to do? You're going to get another mid-level player when you already have so many on the roster?
That's kind of how I'm thinking of it. This team doesn't need more Jaimes or Nikos. They need a top guy. They need that kind of player. They need a Cooper Flag. They need a VJ Edgecombe. They need an Ace Bailey. Like, this is what they at least need the hope of that player and what that player can.
Now, would anybody that's in the top 5 consider taking Miami's 2 picks if they wind up getting them plus X player to have them move up?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't
Because
either.
there's such a drop off in this draft, right? The idea of package 9 and 21 together, and you could somehow move into the top 4 of this draft or the top 5 of this draft. That does not seem likely. Especially again, there's a top 4, and then there's a shelf, and then there's a drop off, and that's it. So yeah, you talk to draft experts too, and they're like, yeah, I mean, like 8 through 20 is kind of the same in this draft, which in one way is kind of good for Miami because it doesn't really matter if they're picking 14 or 8, I guess in that sense. But in terms of the draft lottery part of it, your odds are way slimmer of getting lucky. So yeah, I don't know. I think that this team really needed a top pick, but at the same time, if you're a team like Phoenix and you need cheap talent, then if you're talking about, hey, Miami ends up with 14 and 25 in this draft or something like that, you're probably starting to shop those around. That's probably what this ends up being, to try to go get that star, not just for anything, but to potentially go get that star. All right. Last thing here, David, before we sign off, I'm surprising you with this.
Oh,
top 5 white players in all-time scoring in NBA history. You think you can rank them?
No. I'll try my best. Top 5 white players.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be just give me the 5. I'm not even going to ask you to do it in order.
Are you counting Dirk?
No. I think we agreed on that.
Oh, so not Dirk.
So no European white guys.
Ooh, okay. Top 5.
Career
Bird?
points. Bird, yep. Thing.
Okay. I don't know if McHale makes it.
He did not.
Okay. Bird. Now we're probably gonna have to go back in time a little bit, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, to plumbers and mechanics.
Paul Arizin?
Nope.
No? Wow.
There's a Laker and a Celtic here.
Laker and a Celtic. Laker. George Mikan?
Nope.
Not George Mikan. Another.
You're gonna kick yourself.
Yeah, I'm sure. Or I don't know. I can't think of it, to be honest with you. I'm sure
Mr.
I could.
Clutch. Mr. Clutch.
Oh, it's Jerry West. Come on.
Jerry West. Yeah. Give me another white Celtic.
Another white Celtic.
What's the play-by-play guy's favorite player of all time? Talks about him all the time. Havlicek.
John Havlicek?
Yeah, he's number 1.
Is he really? Well, he did play a long time.
He played a long time.
You're right. All right.
The other two are kind of hard. Tom Chambers, and this guy, and then one more guy that's known more for assists than he is points. But he also played a long time.
John Stockton.
That's right. Ding ding. That was tough. I wouldn't have done better. I would have gotten Larry Bird, Jerry West, and that probably would have been it.
I'm surprised I blanked on West, but I always tend to hold it not against him, but like one of the things that works against his favor is that he didn't play with a 3-point shot. He would have been probably the most prolific scorer in NBA history had he played with a 3-point shot, but he did not have that.
Great point. And there's your history lesson, folks. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.